it's talking about silver hitting all-time highs in all these different global currencies. So right now, silver's at an all-time high in the Indian rupee, the Russian ruble, the Australian dollar, the African rand. It's just inches below its all-time high in the Canadian dollar, the euro, and the British pound is close to hitting all-time highs. And there's a few others. Like what is going on? And do you think that the US dollar is next?
No, it did that with gold for a very long time before it broke out in dollars. And yeah, I do think you'll see it ultimately break out in dollars. It just goes to show that the unjustified inordinate strength of the dollar is blurring the role that silver and gold actually perform. Um, and again, for almost a year, gold had reached all-time highs against almost every currency on the planet except the US dollar. And that's kind of the problem is that, it's doing its job in every other country. People see it for what it is. Um, and this is why so many people here in the United States don't see it for what it is. And I think that that will change, of course. Um, it's just that our media doesn't do a good job of telling us these kinds of things. They have to hear it from you instead. And we're talking to the pimple on the elephant's ass. We're not talking to the elephant. And if the elephant actually understood these kinds of things, maybe they wouldn't only think that the road to retirement is paved with mutual funds and stock certificates. Why did if it's such a small insignificant market, that being silver, why did the Wall Street Journal come out and write a report about the fact that that there is this talk of a growing silver short, and that there's enough silver in the vaults to push that off. But it doesn't talk about the fact that the majority of the silver in these vaults is owned already, and it's not for sale. It's owned by the ETFs, or even the silver in the register, or the eligible category on COMEX is silver that belongs to people like me or my clients or a hedge fund or Tesla or an industrial that makes solar panels. They're not for sale. And so it's almost like nothing to see here. Keep moving on. If it's such an insignificant thing, why just even write about it at all? And I think the same thing is true here, is that silver is really important. People around the world are beginning to see that. And maybe that's why you see India importing it to the degree that they are. And look, we're going to have another 265 million ounce deficit this year, 1.1 billion ounce deficit over the last 6 years.
That's
And
so
when you
crazy.
talk about value, if you look at the M2 money supply, it's up 14 times since 1980, and gold is trading at a 40% discount to its 1980 high, and the money supply is up 14-fold. Look at everything else, and most of it you'll find is commensurate with that money creation in terms of how much more things cost today than in 1980, except for silver. And when you realize that they're trading 3.5 times annual global mine supply per year on the LBMA, it's all paper. How much of that can they trade till they get called on the carpet, and request delivery? How much can they do? And I think it's this kind of price suppression that's keeping the people in the West asleep. The rest of the world sees it because the dollar is unjustifiably strong and shouldn't be as strong as it is. And they're beginning to notice, hey, maybe there is something to owning something strategic like gold and silver. The people in the U.S. will find out last when the dollar really starts to fall. It hasn't happened yet, but I do believe it's inevitable, certainly with the global de-dollarization, with the money creation, with the fiscal irresponsibility that's coming. You put that together with the massive amount of paper trading on COMEX and the LBMA according or in coordination with the massive deliveries, where we saw 8.1% of all the silver on the LBMA delivered in the month of August. These countries understand it, and they're trying to accumulate it at these stupid prices because they know the West is playing a game that ultimately they can't win, and they're trapped. The commercial banks are trapped. And if they try and cover these prices, it pushes the price way, way, way higher. And with the short positions that they have in London right now, in fact, let me just see, the short positions in London right now are 4 to 6 billion ounces that the commercial banks have. Every dollar increase, if they try to cover on COMEX and push the price up, every dollar increase is $4 to $6 billion loss on the LBMA to these commercial banks. And
Jeez.
this is a big number. And the difference is that the COMEX is an exchange where you have an actual exchange that can come in and try and make things right. The LBMA is over the counter. There is no exchange. You just could see a massive default where these people who think they own silver end up getting completely and totally screwed, and it would take down with it some of the biggest Western bullion banks on the planet. So all of this suppression and inordinate dollar strength has kept people here in the West thinking that silver is an archaic relic of the past, which is allowing India and China and the rest of Russia now carte blanche to buy this stuff hand over fist at subsidized prices. You think there's any coincidence? India's bought 800 million ounces. You think there's any coincidence that China, which is at least the #2 largest producer of silver in the world, if not #1, is flying all around the world, according to our friend Sean Kun, buying unrefined silver and in concentrate and doré? And do you think there's any coincidence that now Russia is making a official state policy to accumulate silver for their state fund? No, it's not. And they're using the suppression of the Western market. These banks are trapped to do so, and they are trapped. So
Yeah.
ultimately, price goes much, much higher, probably not at the behest or the wishes of the West, but the market is stronger than the ability of these banks to hold it down because you can stand for delivery. And if you're trading 4 to 6 billion ounces of silver, you got these banks that are short. Well, how much of the 300 million ounces that are actually available for delivery, according to the LBMA, is really available for delivery, standing behind 4 to 6 billion ounces that could stand for delivery? So it's not a good thing. And ultimately, this kind of manipulation, just like all before it, ultimately die. So
Yep.
have patience and stick to itiveness, as my sixth grade teacher used to say. Hang on, stick to your gut, have strong fingertips, and don't let go, because when this breaks, it'll be something to behold.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue into the next thing I wanted to show you. So this is an article I was going to make a video on today, actually. Inside China's bid to build sway over global metals pricing. This is what you talk about a lot, and they bring some good points and actually some quotes from China themselves of this plan. So China is locking in steps to shape the pricing of the vast quantities of industrial metals it produces and consumes, which moves or with moves to attract foreign firms to trade on Shanghai's future exchange, which would eventually fragment global markets. After buying mining assets around the world over the past 2 decades to secure metals needed for industrialization, and more recently to meet its carbon emissions targets, China now wants a bigger say in how prices of those metals are determined. But it has lost market share in metals futures trading and needs to persuade international investors to use the Shanghai Futures Exchange, according to interviews with more than 10 brokers. So it goes down. I want to talk. There's a quote down here, he said. So they said that the Shanghai Futures Exchange did not respond to requests for comment or to questions on timelines for the amounts available to invest in this project, the challenges it faces, or how successful would be measured. However, the state media in June reported Wang Fenghai, general manager at the Shanghai Futures Exchange, saying, quote, only through opening up can we draw in foreign investors, participate in the process of Shanghai Futures Exchange price establishment, therefore enhance price influence. They talk about cross-border delivery capability. This is a pretty big article, but I thought that was interesting that, there's conversations on the table of them trying to, set these prices themselves and use less of the Western suppression, I guess
Well, they will
call it.
set the price ultimately themselves. And when you take the cumulative volume of the Shanghai Metals Exchange and the Futures Exchange, it's up 400-500% over the last few months and has passed the cumulative volume of the COMEX. It's #2. So when you talk about industrial metals, they bought the London Metals Exchange, so they
Yeah,
own the
that's
platform,
crazy.
and they're building warehouses in China to actually warehouse the metals traded in London, and they are striking deals with their Belt Road and with the BRICS all around the world, buying or developing the infrastructure for underdeveloped countries that are resource rich in these commodities, from rare earths to base metals to precious metals to soft commodities like soybean, corn, and wheat. all around the world. And as we've talked about before, the head of the new Shanghai or the BRICS grain exchange said, look, we produce and consume more than the West does, but COMEX sets the price. We don't have price setting power, but that will change with the development of the new BRICS grain exchange. They understand this. And so, yes, they understand that they don't have the price setting capability yet, but they're using the price manipulation of all of these commodities by the West, where you can set oil to -40 a barrel to accumulate them all on the cheap. And then their exchanges, which will gain legitimacy and credibility. Like, for example, if you look at the Shanghai Gold Exchange, not the futures exchange, but the gold exchange, in
Right.
order to buy like a silver bar and to trade it on the metals exchange, you have to buy a physical bar
Yep.
from one of the 6 approved refineries, who then laser inscribe a serial number on that bar that is related to the contract. And this is how you give real price discovery, or keep it authentic, if you will, at least in terms of it being rehypothecated. And so they're taking steps to install legitimacy and credibility into their platforms that will ultimately, I think, take over for the West, when the West is, look, the commercial banks are trapped. And when you have 4 to 6 billion ounces short with only 300 million ounces to deliver, how does that happen? What happens if you start getting called on the carpet? What does that look like? And when you look at the drawdown in silver, in particular, off of LBMA, off of Shanghai, and off of COMEX, where is all the silver if there's a 265 million ounce shortfall, according to the Silver Institute, which doesn't even acknowledge
Yeah.
it being in military equipment?
Or
This is a
aerospace.
game that's going to end very poorly. And I'm telling you, the commercial banks are sweating right now, and they know that.
Yeah.
So ultimately, yeah, you'll see the exchanges in China start to gain far more credibility than what will be a an exposed fraudulent Western system before it's all said and done.
Is China the only exchange where you actually have to deliver or put
To my
gold into?
knowledge, yes, I'm not positive on that. It's a good question.
Yeah, that's
But I do
so
know that
interesting.
that is the case with the Shanghai Metals Exchange. And I think what that is kind of directly addressing the elephant in the room, and that
Yeah.
is the rehypothecation of the Western system, without going out and saying it's a fraud, because they're using that system to game the system themselves, to go around the world buying up everything that's not nailed down. And then once they've done all of that and secured the future production and delivery and refining and all of these things, then they can say, yeah, by the way, you guys are a scam. And
Yep.
now anyone who wants legitimacy with transparency and immutability, come to our side. And you'll see very quickly that those commodity exchanges become the dominant ones across the globe, because of the legitimacy and the transparency and the ability to deliver what it is that is owed to you, rather than right now you look at Comex, which is many hundreds of times rehypothecated. They have rules in the system. There are rules in an exchange. There aren't rules at the LBMA. There really are no rules. They're voluntary. But on Comex, they're not voluntary. There are rules, and those rules say, in the interests of the exchange, that we can cash settle you if it means the exchange is about to die. It's what they, changing the rules is what they did to the Hunt brothers. They'll change the rules here too. And when that happens, that's the same thing as a default. That's the same thing as, yeah, well, we lied and it's a scam. And well, who's going to trust us ever again? And this is what happens when you allow this type of naked shorting by the bullion banks that create an illusion and obliterate price setting or price discovery. And that's, the only reason that the Chinese and the Russians and the Indians aren't bitching about it is because they're the ones buying it all, using the stupidity of our suppression to do so, until there's no longer any cookies in the cookie jar left to be delivered. And that's when you start to see these exchanges on other parts of the world gain real legitimacy for their transparency, the ability to take delivery, and for it being a straight up market, the way that the Western markets should be, but aren't.
When we were, I think it was the last show with Sean, where we had Sean on, you guys were talking about the difference this time with silver's price this high is that it's also in the ETFs. 3 weeks ago, you brought this up for the first time, and then a couple days later, I interviewed Sean separately, and he also brought it up. And you guys were saying that silver ETFs are also something that is pushing a difference this time that wasn't previously. What did you mean by that?
Well, if you look since 2022, the outflows out of the Western ETFs have been stark at a 45-degree angle, like you're skiing down a mountain in Vail. Um, and so, you talk about in particular gold strength with outflows out of the ETFs, a positive real yield in the 6-month treasury versus inflation. Let's not even go down the road that we think the BLS is actually BS and the CP lie is just that, a lie. But we'll take it at face value. Positive real return or positive real yield on a short-term treasury, strong dollar, and outflows out of the ETFs, and yet gold and silver have held their own.